Good evening. I'm very honored to be presenting this proclamation along with Councilmember Fulton in recognition of the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is an absolute pillar of civil rights in the United States for people with visible and invisible disabilities, and gave us the powerful phrase of nothing for us without us, which should be a powerful phrase for all it is. I would be remiss if I did not state that the ADA played an important role in my family's experiences with my father, who was a quadriplegic and often physically could not get into restaurants before 1992. And we had a mechanism for accessibility. Councilmember Fulton, did you want to say anything before we started?
Thank you for indulging me. 1 year ago next week, my family, the world, lost Fran Fulton, who was a dedicated and fierce warrior for the ADA, spent some time in the trenches with our own Kathleen Kleinman. I mention her today because of what she taught me about the ADA, which is that it's not about just full access to participate in society for people with disabilities. It's so that all of society can benefit from the full participation of everyone. One example is my mother-in-law sued the city of Philadelphia multiple times for curb cuts in the sidewalks. I can tell you how much I benefited from that when I tried to push my kids in strollers around the city of Philadelphia. So I am honored to be a part of this proclamation today, not just recognizing the legislation itself, but the people that fought for its passage and the people that fight today for it to reach its full promise.
Whereas individuals with disabilities have suffered mistreatment, discrimination, indignities, and humiliation for decades, and
whereas people with disabilities began to challenge societal barriers that excluded them from their communities, and when parents of children with disabilities began to fight against the exclusion and segregation of their children, and
whereas in the 1980s, the movement to establish laws that protect individuals and groups with disabilities from unfair treatment, provide equal access to employment, allow equal access, and provide special accommodations to public spaces, commercial facilities, and transportation was organized and codified, and
whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990, during a White House ceremony, and whereas
the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in several areas, including employment, transportation, public accommodations, communications, and access to state and local government programs and services, and
whereas the city of Rockville takes an active role in making our community more accessible to people with disabilities by supporting and treating everyone with dignity and respect, and ensuring the rights of all residents to experience equality and freedom from discrimination.
Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Rockville, Maryland, do hereby proclaim July 26, 2024, as the 34th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act being placed into law. Madam Mayor, I so move the proclamation.
Do we have a second? It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye. And to accept the proclamation is Kathleen Kleinman, Chair of the Transportation and Mobility Commission.
I am so moved by the fact that you're mentoring Fran Fulton. I marched and participated in protests with Fran for most of 30 years, and it was sorry to see her go. But as you said, the Americans with Disabilities Act is a civil rights law, and therefore it's also a human rights law. It sets standards for the nation. Other cities and other nations have followed. This new city council and this new mayor and the new administration can and should establish city code and enforcement in the areas of public accommodation and services. We need a vision and a plan for Rockville. I and many others are dedicated to helping in this task.